I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jimmy McGuinness in his life.
You're very welcome along to our Saturday panel. We are focusing on an era when, believe it or not, Dublin weren't the undisputed kings of the Leinster Senior Football Championship. We've got Denis Glennon, we've got Chris Conway, and we've got Paddy Christie with us in studio this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you, lads.
How's it going?
So it's going to be basically a nostalgia panel. Believe it or not, 15 years ago does constitute nostalgia. We're going to focus on the decade from maybe 96 to 2005 or thereabouts. We're going to chat a little bit about this year as well, because really the hook for this is what happened last week, and the Longford story is a good one when they beat Meath, but Carlow really, again, the story of the summer. And I think we should actually just start with that, to just appreciate that. Granted, we've got the elephant of Dublin in the room, and we can talk about that later on, but this has been a pretty good Leinster Championship in terms of storylines, in terms of the neutral perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, I'm a Laois man up against Carlow border and that, and you'd have to sincerely respect what they've done over the last number of months, and continue the good work, obviously, in the foundations that they put in last year. And we've a test coming up against them now next Sunday.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little while. The games have come so thick and fast this year. It's so earlier in the championship as well. There's the prospect of a Super 8 there down the line as well, that I guess any sort of fairy tale story that you do get in the Leinster Senior Football Championship now, there's a little bit more incentive than when you were playing as well, isn't there? Because it's not that one and out situation in the quarter-final.
Yeah, look, it's a huge opportunity for either Laois or Carlow. When you think of it, start of the year, if someone would have told either of those teams that there's a chance that they were going to get promoted and get to a Leinster final and then potentially be one game away from the Super 8s, I'd say they would have jumped at it. So it's a huge opportunity for both teams.
Paddy, as I say, we will talk about Dublin a little bit later on, and it is hard to see any of the previous 10, 11 years changing in terms of the trend of the Leinster champions. But as I say there, that Laois-Carlow game, in terms of being one game away from the last 12 essentially, and therefore one win away from the Super 8s, it's an unbelievable incentive. And in fairness, the structure has changed the dynamic of this championship.
Well, I suppose when they were putting together the idea of the Super 8s, these two teams weren't on the radar as such. I'd say they were thinking about having the Tyrones and the Kerrys and the Dublins and the Mayos all against each other, and I suppose it's fantastic for the game. That's what it's all about. These two have come in now and sort of out of nowhere as such, and down in Division 4, struggling the last few years, and have come good now, and within they're very close to playing Dublin in a Leinster final possibly, and pushing on from there. One game, when I was playing myself, we always thought if we get to a Leinster final, it was hard to be playing Meath or Kildare, but if you got there, you knew that you had one game and then you were into the old All-Ireland quarter-final. So, it's fantastic for those teams. It'll bring on football in both counties immensely, particularly Carlow, I suppose. Chris would have had plenty of success with Laois over the years, but for Carlow, you'd love to see something special happening there,
Yeah, without question. If you've got any questions for the lads about this year's championship, feel free to tweet us at Off The Ball. You can text us using the text number 53106. That'll cost you 30 cents. And we're also live on Facebook, YouTube and Periscope. You can just comment on the stream there if you want to get in touch as well. So we are going to get stuck into what I've deemed to be the glory days of the Leinster Football Championship. It's post-1995, Paddy, so would you call it the glory days of the Leinster Championship?
They were nice days, I suppose, looking back and reminiscing with the lads. The football was very different in those days. Everyone went in thinking they could win a Leinster Championship. Now, Meath and Kildare were very strong, and that's my abiding memory, is I was beginning to sort of come into the team at that stage around 96, and it was hard to see Meath and Kildare. Maybe not so much Kildare, they came a little bit later, but certainly Meath were the big giants, and to try and defeat them was a huge deal. So I suppose when I think about those times, Laois and Westmeath, the lads here, they both came good. You had sort of Wexford as well, hanging around, some decent forwards. Louth had the odd lad over the years as well, could pull off a shock. So there was loads of stuff happening around Leinster, and it was hard to win. And I remember when we won in 2002, it was such a big deal. It was enormous to win it, and it was prestigious, and Leinster football was on a high. So I suppose when I look back on it, they were great days. As the Dublin lads now, who are winning Leinsters all around them, probably don't see the same. But for me, it was a big deal, and I certainly enjoyed playing, and I would like to win a few more Leinsters. But it the football was very enjoyable, and it was very sort of attack minded. You went for it, you had no protection. There were days where these two lads were giving me a bit of trouble, and there was no one giving me a hand. There was no one going to come back. You just got torn to shreds, and everyone just ate you afterwards and said you should have given them a couple of thumps, or you should have done this, you should have done that. But there was no one coming back to give you a hand. There was no blanket defences, so it was just man on man, and the best man wins in the day.
Yeah, because when you think of a strong football provincial championship, you think of Ulster over the last 10 years. So the way you're talking there as well, in terms of the physicality, it wasn't too dissimilar from Ulster in that perspective as well. Yeah,
no, for sure. Like there was plenty of hitting, and Paddy was giving out most of them at the time. But no, it was a remarkable time. Like when you consider that from 1995 to 2006, the Leinster Championship was never retained by any county, and like even in '99 we slipped up against Dublin. The first day we thought we were nearly over the line, and they got a leveller. That was I suppose we seen that as our big chance of breaking through. Then we sort of slipped back a small bit then, and it wasn't until Michael came in then that we got rejuvenated and that in the early noughties and that. And look, we were lucky probably to win the one against Kildare, but we'd consider ourselves unlucky then to lose the one to my neighbours here in terms of Westmeath in 04 and obviously Dublin in 05.
Yeah, I dare say the cult of the Kerry manager might actually play a part in this discussion over the next 40 minutes or so. But like Dennis, you're obviously a small bit younger, so you would have been watching the lads a bit. You would have been watching what was happening in the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, I suppose I grew up watching these guys playing football, and Paddy says that he was left very isolated. I felt very isolated up in Croke Park when he was marking me. I grew up, as I said, watching these lads playing, and Paddy Christie at the time would have been the main full back in the country, and I got an opportunity, I suppose, to experience what it was like to mark one of the top full backs around at the time. And I suppose it opened my eyes really to the standard that I needed to get to become a top footballer, and I suppose carry on my career as an inter-county footballer. So I learned a lot from watching these lads growing up, and as I said, it was different times. It was great when we were forwards. You got to take on your man. If you bet him, it was a score. Nowadays, if you take on your man, there's a good chance there's a wing back sitting in front of you waiting for you to come in. But different times, and it was a far more enjoyable football.
Yeah, for sure. Paddy, talk to us a little bit about what happened post 1995, because it's a hell of a long drought after the success of 95. Was it just a matter of you actually waited so long for 95 to come around, and that it was just party central all throughout that winter? And then I know you're kind of more involved, obviously, 96, 97 and onwards. But was that as simple as that kind of the success of 95 went to the head?
I don't think so. I think, if I'm being brutally honest about it, and I'm not disrespectful to anyone, like the team in 95 was at the end, I think, you know, and I think that was the sad part of it. Not all the lads were at the end, but it was beginning to fizzle out, and they were very, very close to losing 95 as well. I think, as far as I can remember, Tyrone, there was a score at the end where a fella picked the ball off the ground. Supposedly it turned out I don't think he did. That's how close it was. They just about got over the finishing line, and from then on things were beginning to unravel. Mickey Whelan ironically came in 96, who'd be very highly thought of, and I thought he did a great job, and yet he never really could get to grips with things. There was problems with players leaving and dropping out and losing interest, and I think the team just ran out of steam. They'd gone hard for an awful long time. They'd lost a few very big games, and I suppose when I came into the team, into the panel in April 95, and I was just shocked at how sort of fragile things were, because I think they just suffered so much. I mean, I grew up looking at these guys play and going to watch the matches, and you know, there were some great players, but they didn't have that belief. And I suppose I saw
this is the start of 95.
Yeah, and then it changed after that, and you know, fellas did get a bit more belief, but sadly it coincided with a lot of them being at the end of their careers, and things fizzled out. And I suppose the other thing I'd have to say, these guys, counties like the likes of Laois and Westmeath, started to put a lot of underage work in, which Dublin hadn't done, you know. And I suppose now everyone's talking about how much work they've done, but that was in the last 10 years, the last 15 years. But before that, Dublin had taken it, I wouldn't say taken their eye off the ball, it just wasn't done. Things were very messy, and I mean, I played underage obviously in Dublin, and there wasn't the same preparation done, wasn't the same work put in. And I think the likes of the Laois and the Westmeaths started to put a serious investment into underage, and you saw that coming through then in the mid 2000s, you know, 2003, 2004. These guys would have been, you know, involved in winning minors and 21s, or being competitive in them, and then it came through you know, they came through the process and they eventually came into Croke Park then and started to do it at senior level. But I think Dublin had taken the eye off the ball, if I'm being honest.
It's very interesting that you bring up the underage thing, because I was going to get to that. And I guess the two lads here, Chris and Denis, could probably explain the differing ends of the spectrum here, because from your perspective anyway, Denis, it was kind of a matter of we don't care who we're playing. Like, you were competing with Kerrys and Tyrones, never mind winning Leinster Championship. Whereas, was that different for you, Chris?
Yeah, well, 95 was obviously, I suppose, a seminal moment in Leinster at the time, because, as Paddy alluded to, the Dubs had worked so hard to get to the Holy Grail in terms of winning the All-Ireland. Probably the hunger wasn't necessarily there, maybe within some members of the squad there afterwards. And in 95, we played Westmeath in the Leinster minor final and lost to them after a double replay. You know, there were three of the best games that I ever played in, and obviously the first day was in Croke Park, and definitely for ourselves in Laois, and obviously Westmeath proved it as well. We actually drew on that, and Westmeath went on and won the All-Ireland, minor All-Ireland in 95. We followed them in 96 and pushed on towards winning Leinster's in under 21, and it just seemed it was natural to us and a natural progression, you know, that we were going to go and succeed at senior level.
Like, did you know any different at that time? Did you ever have the inferiority complex at all?
No, I suppose I came into the team in 04, and a lot of them players that I suppose Paul's speaking about were after making that progression from under 21 into the senior outfit. So most of them had a couple of years under their belt at the time. So I was kind of just that small little additive, I suppose, to that success that they had. And I suppose they had that attitude that and belief that they were going to win no matter what. So I sort of fed down to younger players like myself and Paul Martin and lads like that had just come into the panel. So I didn't really know any different.
Yeah, for sure, because it's an incredibly hard thing to build up, I'd imagine, if you haven't got that at underage level. Like, how do you gain the confidence of saying we're the best team in Leinster if you haven't been thinking that way all your life?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose that's where the structures come into play, you know, be it development squads and that, and trying to generate that confidence, you know, amongst squads. Like with Laois this week, you know, they played minor and under 20 against Carlow and Kildare. I drew with Carlow in the minor and slipped up after being 8 points up against Kildare. 2 years ago, they would have played the Leinster final against Kildare and that, you know. So, look, we're hoping we're probably clutching at straws a small bit at the moment, you know, in terms of underage and that, but it is definitely warranted and necessary.
The inverse of that obviously is... Sorry, what you're about to say.
No, I was just going to say something interesting that I found there was Laois. I went to see Laois play Dublin in the it was around 2005-2006 Leinster Championship in minor football. You know, it was down in Carlow, and it'll just tell you where Laois were at the time. Laois destroyed Dublin. I remember going down and being devastated afterwards. I don't know, I was in the middle of my career or sort of 3/4 of the way through my career. I went down because there was a few Ballymun fellas playing. Philly McMahon was playing corner forward and Dermot Connolly was playing full forward. Alan Hubbard, who would have played 4 or 5 years with Dublin, was playing cornerback. Trying to think of who else there was, but I remember leaving there thinking, like, Laois they were just so far ahead of us. And Connolly was, as far as I remember, I think he was destroyed. Maybe he got a few balls in the first half. I think he can't remember how it fizzled out. It fizzled out, and I think he might have been taken off. Or Philly, it didn't work out. He started off fairly well, and again fizzled out. And I remember in the second half, we were sitting in the stand in Carlow, and these Laois crowd were just going berserk, and they were just lapping it up, and I was just getting more and more angry, and you couldn't say anything because they were so far ahead of us. So I suppose when people talk about, you know, Jim Gavin and Dublin and where it's gone, I mean, how was Mickey Whelan going to do anything, or how were any of these fellas going to do anything if the raw materials weren't there? I mean, a lot of the stuff a lot of success depends on having the raw materials, and it's not a guarantee by any means, but you certainly need to have it there. And you could see Laois years afterwards at senior level building off their underage success. And I suppose with Dublin now, that's where they've come from, really. Ultimately, that's where they've come from. I'm sure Jim does a very good job, and we'll never know because everything is kept very, very quiet, but it's obvious that he does a very good job, and I don't want to detract from him in any way, but I think that people should remember where the bad old days were with Dublin, and I mean, thankfully they seem to have sorted it out.
Yeah, Did Philly ever play corner forward after that day?
He might have played a couple of times with Ballymun. He likes to think of himself as a corner forward, but we have to sort of pull him back every so often. You know, Philly now gets carried away sometimes. He likes to take the odd shot coming from.
Up with the score.
Yeah, he likes to take a shot going forward, but I don't know if I'd like to see him now as a target man. I'm not sure that it'd work out.
So you mentioned underage structures there and building that confidence up, building that, just getting rid of that inferiority complex, I guess, which starts from underage. But from your perspective, was it different? Was it quicker to happen at the other end of the mountain where that confidence could have been chipped away at, and suddenly Dublin aren't not only the Kings of Ireland anymore, but they're no longer the Kings of Leinster, and you're suddenly looking up at everybody else in the province?
Yeah, I mean, during my career, or when
post 95. So after it becomes apparent that you weren't going to retain Leinster after Meath beat you in 96, I think.
Yeah, in the Leinster final.
And like, how many years does it take before you're relegated to a level where you feel that you don't have the Dublin swagger anymore? Yeah. You don't feel like you did in 95.
I felt it took 3 or 4 years. I think I felt that in 97, 98. Even coming into 99, we played Meath and Leinster final, but there was still this sort of thing hanging around of, we're Dublin, you know what I mean? We're still going to be, you know, we're going to be hard bet, we're going to win. And I remember talking to a few fellas like Kieran Whelan, they'd be the same vintage as me, and Paddy Andrews, and saying, lads, like, we have to remember these guys are just better than us now. We just have to admit that. And it was very tough for people to admit, you know, it was a hard pill to swallow. That the Westmeaths and the Laois of this world, they've just put in more work underage. They just have better footballers than us. And when you were getting the stick, when these guys were beating us in big games and you were getting the stick about it, it was very annoying because it was disrespectful to them as well. They just were better than us on some days, and people just couldn't accept that. And I suppose with Dublin, it's high profile, there's a lot of media coverage, and they wanted to find faults in things and where fellas were going wrong and that sort of thing. And we did have problems, like we would have had problems up front a little bit. I suppose it looks bad for me as a defender complaining about the forwards, and I'm sure they would complain about me leaking scores, but we just didn't over the years have the forwards that the Dublin team now do have. I mean, they've 6 forwards now who would get onto any team in Ireland, I think, and their subs would as well. And we found it hard on any given day when the likes of the Laois and Westmeath and the Meaths and Kildare's put up to us, and we were under pressure, we couldn't get key scores, and I suppose that's where it was. But people didn't want to accept that. People wanted to find some other huge problem, like that there was a problem with the management, or there was a problem with the facilities, or there was a problem with the boots we were wearing. The other teams had better players, and I just found it disrespectful sometimes to the other counties that the fault was always lying with us. They couldn't say that, look, Laois are a fine team, Westmeath are a fine team, Meath are a fine team, Kildare are a fine team.
Yeah, like at that time it is kind of a triumvirate of power. Yourselves, Meath, Kildare, obviously Offaly won it in 97, I think, so that kind of is a bit of a wild card, but it really isn't until 2003, 2004 where you guys come into play, when Laois and Westmeath come into play, when it becomes a decade that we will never forget in Leinster football, when it becomes really special, when it isn't just 3 counties with huge tradition. And I guess just before we get into 2003 and then 2004, just after 2002, from your perspective, because is it fair to say that 2002 was the year you started to feel that swagger coming back a little bit, and obviously Armagh happens?
Yeah, well, the swagger was, I suppose, you're grinning there because the swagger was Tommy Lyons. That's what it was. I mean, he went on about this swagger thing, you know.
Did he mention it in the dressing room?
And yeah, he mentioned it from time to time. I mean, he would talk about, you know, trying to bring the swagger back into the team. And like, to be honest with you, he did. You know, no matter what anyone says, I found him a breath of fresh air. I know he used to like the media a lot and talk a lot and big things up, but I thought he was great in that. You have to remember, like, when we went out and were playing the likes of these lads and the other counties in Leinster, we had an inferiority complex. You know, we had lost 3 Leinster finals in a row, 99, 2000, 2001, and we had doubts about ourselves, as you would have. It doesn't matter that you're Dublin. Okay, Dublin now are a different animal, but at the time we were very vulnerable. And he came in and he changed things around. He brought in fellas, new fellas, and up front, I mean, we scored an enormous amount that year. We conceded a bit as well, probably down to me and the other lads in the full back line. We weren't as tight as we should have been, but we were scoring loads. And you always felt when you went out that we're going to do damage here. I remember thinking Alan Brogan is going to give somebody an awful lot of trouble, and he did against Meath. He just came out of nowhere. Nobody had heard of him, and next thing, bang! It was like they were all over the shop. They didn't know what to do because it was normally just Desi Farrell. You know, and if you could hold Desi and a couple of other fellas sometimes, you'd Ian Robertson there when he wasn't injured, if he wasn't carrying injuries, he was very, very dangerous and a fine footballer. And you had a few other fellas sort of hanging around, but overall, you didn't have the threat. And then next thing, Alan Brogan came and you'd Ray Cosgrove, I think 623 in 2002. So you started to think to yourself, yeah, this is coming back. But I suppose we got hit then in 2003 with a sucker punch. I mean, my recollection of that game, don't even want to think about it, to be honest with you, but when I think of the first half, I just think to myself, we have these guys. I was marking a lad who was doing a lot of damage in other games. Is it Dentist, Ian Fitzgerald?
Ian Fitzgerald, yeah.
And he was a fine footballer. And I remember being worried about the game beforehand, and I sort of had him under reasonable control. I was thinking to myself, we have this sorted. And we were beginning to clock up a few scores, and we didn't sort of finish them off in the first half, and then they came out and they just played fantastic football. And from then on, you just had that hanging over you. 2003, we defeated by Armagh, the qualifiers afterwards. 2004, it was Denis and the crew again, where we had chances to win the game, didn't finish them off, and they went and played fantastic football.
Yeah, let's get into a couple of those years. We'll get to 2003 in just a moment, but firstly, Denis, you're about to make it to the senior grade there. 2004 is obviously your first year. Are you looking around you at that time, just chomping at the bit, waiting to get a go at the Dublin at the Dubs? What was your view of Dublin at that time?
I suppose it never really changed. They were the high-profile team. Croke Park, as far as I was concerned, was their home, and it was a huge opportunity for me as a young footballer to play against them. So, I was biting, I suppose, at the tooth to get out on the field against Dublin. But when we still had to get over Offaly, which was a local rivalry for us, and it was a game that was very close. So we never really focused on Dublin until we got that game over with. I suppose it was kind of Paddy O'Shea's attitude that you take each game as they come and you focus on that. So we didn't really focus on Dublin until we got over Offaly.
Yeah. You mentioned Paddy there, which we'll get into, and it was kind of the cult of the Kerry manager, as I've already mentioned at the start. And I guess Mick was the trailblazer in that with regards to Kildare, with regards to the Leinster Senior Football Championship. When he takes the mantle in Laois at the end of 2002, so 2003 is your first season with him, are you looking around to each other in the dressing room at that point thinking, we can win Leinster now? Yeah,
well, I suppose the first thing that he did was got the vast majority of players that were obviously up to the senior standard, to commit for the number of years that he was involved. And because for different reasons, different times, we were short some players off the panel and that in years previous. And thankfully, he was down. We lost the qualifier to Meath heavily in Portlaoise in 2002, but he was at the game, and I don't know whether he's seen enough that day to come on board, but I would imagine it was obviously from the underage success from the previous years, and he knew the talent that was in the county, and he duly came on board, and he naturally got us fit to a level that we probably hadn't reached beforehand, and again raised the profile, raised the confidence of the whole squad and that and the panel, and we went well in the league. We lost out to Tyrone in the league final, and we just rolled back into the championship, with Wexford and Dublin, as Paddy, alluded to. It was obviously a massive day for us, beating Dublin in semi-final, but we still didn't have any silverware, to show for it, and thankfully that came after beating our other near neighbours Kildare afterwards in a what was a pulsating final. It was when you look back on it, the standard and the pace of the game was exceptional. You mentioned the fitness there. Was it a rude awakening? Probably for maybe a bit more for other lads, but yeah, no, it was different. It was obviously there was plenty of laps, plenty of running, but that was a secret in the early times. He often passed comment about going over to see Manchester United training in pre-season and commented on how hard they trained in the pre-season. But then once the games came, the training was done. It was in the bank. You had it in the bank, and when you needed to call in the reserves, then you knew, and that obviously instilled confidence in you. Even going down the home stretch with 20 minutes left in games, you knew that you were going to be able to stay running and keep the burners on for longer. So it's not rocket science. Is it true what they say about the legendary aura of that? When he walks in, is it just like any other manager who's doing things right, or is there an element that this is Mick O'Dwyer? I'm going to listen to him a little bit closer because of the stuff that he's done in the game. Yeah, no, I think that's only natural. Obviously you have the likes of Brian Cody, with that aura in the hurling sphere for the last number of years, and I'm sure Paddy obviously had it, on similar effect upon Westmeath. He brought Tomás O'Flaherty obviously up with him, and Billy Sheehan joined us a couple of years into Miko's career as well, like, and that, and it was great times. Obviously, we reflect that we only won one Leinster, you know, and there's a lot of regret there.
Is there,
in terms of that? Yeah, no, we felt obviously that we, whilst look, winning the first Leinster in 56 years or whatever it was great, but unfortunately, it was some unfinished business as well, you know.
As in, you felt that things weren't done right in terms of preparation, or that just missed opportunities in further Leinster finals?
No, not necessarily. I think, well, obviously, again, no disrespect to the two teams in 04, obviously, against Westmeath, you know. This, a bit like Paddy's story, I suppose, with us in the 03, we were going very well in the first half and thought, you know, and suddenly we ended up losing the grip on the game and we ended up behind, you know, in the 04 final with Westmeath. And lost the replay, and Joe Higgins did his cruciate in the replay. Brian Beano McDonald broke his leg, you know, in the Tyrone game and that, in the qualifiers, and thankfully both of them came back, obviously, to add to their stellar careers and that. But the following year might have been a bit slow getting started, you know, that meeting or where the media were down at the training camp or where we were training in the heat, and obviously Miko was talking about leaving, but I think the Dubs might have been trying to twist his arm at the time as well, and that might have had as much to do with it as maybe the attendance numbers at training at the time. But we knuckled down, you know, and we had two more great years with him. Obviously 05, we lost by a point. Mossy Quinn kicked a free from the 45 and went across then and kicked the 45 in injury time. We might have been a bit disappointed with Joe McQuillan in the refereeing in the last few minutes of it, but again, we had come from 6 points down, and we thought, again, we were in touching distance of obviously beating Dublin in an actual Leinster final, which Laois had never done, and unfortunately didn't get over the line. And similar the following year, they hit us with a couple of goals in 06. Either side of half time went on and beat us, but Miko rolled. We had a few weeks before the qualifiers, you know, and we got back to a couple of weeks hard training before we had Tyrone, who were All Ireland champions in Portlaoise, and we turned them over. Yeah. And you know, we went on obviously to be ahead against Mayo in an All Ireland quarter final by 2 points going into injury time as well, and we didn't see it out, and Mayo Julie bet us in the quarter-final replay, and Kieran MacDonald gave the exhibition then against Dublin.
The rest is history, as they say. I do want to get a little bit more into the 2004 season, because that's when Denis and your teammates get into the proceedings really well, and that's when the three of you all connect in a mad Leinster Championship, really, and kind of the height of what we're talking about here. I do need to take one quick set of ads, though. You can tweet us at Off The Ball if you've got any questions for the lads. You can text us at 53106, or you can comment on the stream if you happen to be watching on YouTube or Facebook. Stick with us for just a few moments.
Join the conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
A new car doesn't have to cost the earth. Ford's eco-technology maximises efficiency and minimises emissions, which is not just good for the environment, it's good for your wallet too. And to save you even more, if you place an order with your local participating Ford dealer by June 30th, you can get an incredible clean-up bonus of up to €6,000. Choose performance, style and power and experience a real force of nature. Clean up with Ford for 182. Ford. Go further. Terms and conditions apply. See Ford.ie for details.
It's all fun and games this bank holiday weekend at Appliances Delivered. The fun is in choosing which incredible value appliance to order. And the game is Beat the Clock, where every 6 hours Appliances Delivered will offer a different, unbelievable deal, including free installation, free delivery, or a whopping 20% off. Better be quick though, each deal only lasts for 6 hours. And when it's gone for next day delivery. Time is ticking, so get clicking. Beat the clock today, only at appliancesdelivered.ie. Why pay more? Terms and conditions apply.
Bruce Betting are one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. Download the iOS app today to see why Bruce Betting are giving you more for World Cup 2018. Bruce Betting, your World Cup bookmaker. In store, online, and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Here at M&S, we're committed to lowering our prices on the things you buy most often. That's why from this month, we're introducing M&S for Less. With M&S for Less, we're bringing down the prices of a huge range of your favourite products. The same delicious food for a smaller price. Lower prices have never tasted so good. M&S for less.
Hi, I'm Enda Murphy, psychotherapist and mental health author, and I'd like to invite you to my talk, From Bungee Jumps to Panic Attacks, Understanding the True Nature of Anxiety. It takes place on Tuesday, June the 26th from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Accenture Lecture Theatre in UCD. I'll show you how to overcome panic attacks, share techniques for positive mental health, and you'll also receive a signed copy of my best-selling book, 5 Steps to Happiness. Open to everyone. Tickets are available now at endamurphy.eventbrite.com.
This is a message for all hard hat companies employing large numbers of contract workers on site. Making sure they're safe and compliant is your responsibility. Inishify makes managing your contractor inductions easy. With a simple-to-use online system, find out how Inishify can save you time and money. For help with your site, see our site and request a free demo today. Visit contractorsafety.ie now. That's contractorsafety.ie.
It's the 16th country I've seen them in on this tour jackpot.
The Lotto jackpot is €4.5 million. Play responsibly in-app, in-store or at lottery.ie. Lotto. Time to play. Estimated jackpot.
I saw the car go in off the end of the pier, and I suppose at that moment I decided I had to do something. So I ran the length of the pier and jumped off the pier to help the man from the car. And then I realised that the passenger window was open and saw the water coming into the car then, so swam around the car and eventually had to drag him out through the window of the passenger door. All that happened in a minute.
133 people drown every year in our waters, on farms and in our homes. Let's bring that number down. Learn swimming and life-saving skills with Irish Water Safety at iws.ie. And always wear a life jacket on water.
Enjoy your independent time this Saturday. Sun, sea, sand and books. Don't miss our Summer Reads book special in review. From fiction to thriller, adventure and classics. Create your own outdoor oasis with Weekend's Guide to Summer Dining. And in sport, John Mullane tells what's gone wrong with Waterford and Tomás O'Shea explains why Kerry won't win Sam. Irish Independent on Saturday. It's your weekend.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back. You're listening to our Saturday panel with Denis Glennon, Chris Conway and Paddy Christie. We were reflecting on the glory days of the Leinster Senior Football Championship, and just before the break we were about to get into what I deem to be the best year in living memory in the Leinster Football Championship, which was 2004. A very happy year for you, Denis.
Yeah, great year for me, I suppose. I was an 18-year-old when it started. I was 19 when we actually had finished the year, and I suppose I knew no different. A young lad coming into a panel full of top players. We had John Kane, I suppose, full back. He got 2 All-Stars in his time, his career. He had Desi Dolan. Everyone knew him throughout the country, you know. And you had Rory O'Connell, had won an All-Star the year before. So there was a great group of players there, great experience, and some fabulous footballers.
How much of a wounded animal was Paddy, pardon the pun on the word animal, on Paddy O'Shea that year when he was coming in to the Westmeath camp? Because I was watching Marooned the other day, and geez, he was an angry man after Kerry, and he really wanted to make amends with Westmeath. Yeah, he did, and he was a phenomenal character. He had a way of getting the best out of players, and I just think people say, what was he like, you know, how was he like to work with? And I just think of this one time where we were after playing a match, and I can't remember who we were playing or that, but I scored 1-5 or something like that. I was fierce happy with myself as a young lad. And as I said, I was biting to get into this team at the time. And he rang me anyway. I think he was in the airport getting the flight back. And I knew he had a couple of jars on him. And he says to me, you're not tackling. And he says, I'm going to drop you off the panel. And he hung up the phone. That was it. And I remember I was on the edge of my bed and I actually started to cry. I says, oh my God, here was the opportunity. I thought I did well. And he left me stew for about 15 minutes and the pain kind of hit me, you know. Just maybe I didn't do as well as I thought I was after doing. So he rang back and I seen the phone ringing back and I answered the phone and he goes, Paddy here, and he says, look, he says, I've been thinking about it, I'll give you one last chance. And I remember going out the next day and I don't think I took a shot. I was tackling all over the place just to prove to him I could tackle, but you know, he was a fabulous character and that was his way of getting the best out of players, and you know, it's something I haven't seen any manager since. Like, you know, he kind of dealt with the mentality of each individual, and he looked at their weaknesses and he tried to make a strength out of it. What age were you that year?
I was 18 when I started and 19 when it was, I suppose, concluded. So, and I was only about 72 kgs when Paddy started bullying me up.
I think you described him as Drago there over my shoulder when you met in 2004. Was it an intimidating place to go? Of course, when it's the Dubs, I mean, it changes things dramatically, but even just in the biggest stage of them all.
Yeah, it is. Like, I can remember the first time when 96, I think I played half-time for the Leinster cool camps or whatever it was at the time. I remember going into Croke Park and the big stadium going, wow, someday I want to play here, you know, and that was kind of started it off for me. But when we drove in, I remember on the bus, we had Paddy made sure we had the guard escort in and everything, so it was very professionally done. And we drove in and you've seen all the Dub supporters and it's just this sea of blue everywhere and it's very intimidating, you know, and for a young lad like me who had never experienced it, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I getting myself in for here? And, you know, they were sending gestures onto the bus and stuff like that and I was like, will we get out of here alive, you know, that's the way I was thinking. But after we got the result, they were actually the most, I suppose they were great supporters to Dublin. They gave us the thumbs up, said fair play to you, you know, you deserved your win. And, you know, it was a phenomenal experience for me and something I'll never forget.
Yeah, they didn't give us the thumbs up. I remember 2003 was bad enough, but 2004 was worse. There was like, Tommy would have gone an awful lot of hassle that year. Tommy Lyons got an awful lot of grief coming in off the pitch and that sort of thing, you know. And again, coming back to it, the original point, just had a very good team. They played well, and psychologically they broke through. Like they were iffy at the start. I remember Denis. I can't remember much of the game, but little bits and pieces. I remember somebody gave him an awful bad pass, and I intercepted it, and like they all went into a shell for a few minutes, and sort of stopped making runs and that sort of thing. And that was classic. You know, they just hadn't got over the finishing line just yet, but then they did, and then they were a different animal. When they won at the end, then obviously that just gave them an awful lot of belief, and from then on, you know, they obviously carried on and they did a decent year overall. So I mean, it was just one of those things where we needed to finish them off in the first half, and we didn't. And then once they started getting going, they realised themselves, you know, we're as good as these fellas, if not a lot better, and they proved it afterwards, you know.
Yeah, I think the body language of Tommy Lyons kind of spoke volumes after that game. He was sickened. I think Paddy is trying to say something to him at full time, and he's just not having any of it at that point. He's like, and you can kind of see him wringing his hands through his hair at that point. Like, did it feel at that moment that Tommy Lyons was in big trouble, and that almost his, I guess, his death right from Dublin as a manager had been signed the previous year almost?
Yeah, I mean, 2003 was disappointing. Laois had pipped us, and then it was in Armagh, the qualifiers. We'd started quite well, and then I think Stephen Gluckson got sent off. I think there was a couple of other. I ended up taking the kickouts for a few minutes as fullback. There was all types of turmoil going on, and it just finished very badly. And then 2004, I suppose this didn't help things at all. We went out, we played Kerry in the qualifiers afterwards. We got ourselves back together, and then we got back into the qualifiers in the quarter-final against Kerry. Again, it sounds like a familiar pattern. Started fairly well, and at half-time we were in the game, and then they got a goal. Darragh Kinnaird got a goal, as far as I remember, off the ball, hit off the upright, sort of fortuitous enough, and then they carried on, just wiped us then. But I suppose Tommy took a lot of the criticism for that, and it was very unfair. I mean, there wasn't an awful lot of fellas around the county who weren't playing, who should have been playing. There wasn't, you know, he wasn't the one kicking the ball wide. He wasn't the one fouling fellas. He wasn't the fella dropping the ball. Like, I just thought it was very, very unfair. And of course, you'll see different people, former players, having different opinions on him. But for me, I would be in his camp, and that I thought he did a good job with us. There was a lot of emotion, psychological baggage there from years before, and I thought he helped us to get over the finishing line. I suppose when you look back at it now, you'd sort of say, well, you won one Leinster and then you won in 2005 with a different manager. But I mean, what's the big deal? But it was a huge deal for us. I mean, when you'd lost 3 Leinster finals in a row, and Meath were that towering giant that you just had a Graham Geraghty and Trevor Giles and these guys, and then you had these other fellas coming up through the ranks, the likes of the Laois and Westmeath. It was a huge deal to win 1 or 2. So for us to get up to win that 2002 one was huge, and for him, I think he had to get some credit in that. And to see him getting that sort of abuse, I found it very hard to. I think weeks afterwards, particularly 2004, I found it difficult. I just thought that there was no place in the game for that. I think if you're getting paid professionally big amounts of money, I think you have to sort of take a fair bit of abuse. But I just don't think he deserved what he got that time, and it was like vitriol that was coming through. But that was before online stuff was really big, you know what I mean? I can only imagine what he would have got now, you know.
Was that the worst you'd seen a manager get abuse like that?
I think so. I think Mickey Whelan got a lot in 96, 97. These guys, certainly Denis wouldn't remember it. I think he was playing his goal games that time. But 96, we lost the Leinster final, and then 97 in the early rounds of the National League, things weren't going well. There was a match against Offaly in Parnell Park, and Offaly were going well at the time, ironically managed by Tommy Lyons, and he got an awful lot of abuse that day, Mickey Whelan. I think he stepped down after that. I can't remember exactly, but I remember thinking to myself, God, like he was getting dog's abuse. And then little did I realise that years later that it could get a lot worse than that. I mean, I think 2004 was the worst. As far as I can remember, there was an incident where he was spat at and that sort of thing. I was just like, there's no place in the game for that.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Like, talk about being cut down to size at that point, or beyond that entirely, and it's the complete opposite for the two of you. I mean, ending a 60-year drought, ending a drought that lasted forever, literally. Like, at that point, we'll start, I guess, with the Laois element. Is it just a moment where you start to think, right, this is going to be the start of something, rather than having reached the promised land?
Yeah, no, certainly that was the general feeling, you know, down our way at the time. You know, a bit like ourselves in '99, we had almost beaten Dublin in the semi-final. I remember 0-1 Westmeath, obviously very close to beating Meath, you know, which would have been a first for them at the time, and probably neither of us got over the line and might have checked our momentum at the time for a couple of years. But yeah, when we bounced back in 03, and obviously Westmeath came along then in 04 and that. But even you know, we felt that even after losing 04 that we could regroup and still go on and emerge, you know what I mean, with more silverware.
Like, would you have believed that if I told you in 2004, listen, Dublin are going to win every single Leinster title between now and 2018, bar 2010? Like,
No.
would you believe that?
No. It completely, I suppose, it took me by surprise, but as the years went on, the mentality started changing completely, where you kind of, the onset was, even the start of the pre-season was just like, the most you can achieve here is, you know, promotion in the league, or you could get to a Leinster final, but there was no way you could beat them. That's how far Dublin went. But look, Dublin they've started to do that outside of Leinster now. You know, you've seen what they did to Tyrone and Monaghan the last couple of years, two of the top teams in the country. They're a phenomenal team, and they deserve huge credit for that.
Yeah, for sure. Just one last thing before we get into that, and it's just about another thing that kind of struck me from watching Marooned again the other day was Paddy talking about how he used to psychologically not manipulate you, but just get you up to the pitch of the game. You've already spoken about the manipulation that Paddy used, but he used to talk about getting you hyped up, but in a controlled way. You didn't want to be out of control, and it felt with some teams that are chasing something that they're so hungry for, they can be complete lunatics on the pitch. But with your team, it felt that there was a mental side there where you were going to keep cool, but you were going to be hungry as hell at the same time.
Yeah, like as I said, the first thing Paddy said when he came into the dressing room was, I've won 8 All-Irelands. You could hear a pin drop straight away, because, you know...
That's the first thing he said.
First thing he said, you know, and as I said, after that, you could just see everyone was tuned into what he was saying. You know, I was talking about how he gets the best out of players, and I just refer back to the Leinster final the first day. I think Alan Mangan, one of the most gifted footballers I ever played with, who could kick off both feet, got shouldered out across the sideline. And I think it was well documented, the video clip after that, where he says you were thrown over like a loaf of bread. The next day, Alan Mangan went down, kicked 4 points in play.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Like that's how he got the best out of players. And you know, as I said, Luke Dempsey did an unbelievable job of Westmeath up to that. But Paddy was able to get that little bit extra, you know, to bring, I suppose, to get that mentality that you could actually beat the likes of Dublins and Laois and Kildares and all these teams. You can tweet us at or text us rather at 53106 for 30 cent, or tweet us at Off the Ball if you've got any questions for the lads. Just a couple of texts to get to here. Aidan's been in touch. I'm not sure, is he trolling you here, Paddy, but he says that Meath team back then were hard and fair.
Which one of the late 90s?
Let's say 96, and let's say the late 90s as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with him over that. Okay. They were hard and fair, but they did some great forwards. Jeez, I mean, Graham Geraghty, I think he played into his 40s. I'd say he could still do a bit of damage. I met him there, I think, last year, and he looks in great shape. I mean, he's just a class act. Trevor Giles. Darren Fay was full back. You just looked at the quality of the team throughout. I mean, they were fantastic, and I suppose Sean Boylan had that bit of magic about him as well. The nicest guy you'd ever meet, and yet fellas would come out and take your head off as easy as anything. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't have any problem with that, because we would have done the same to try and win. No, they were a great team. I don't know whether that fella is trying to have a go at me because my father is from Meath and I have a lot of connections with Meath, but I would have nothing but respect for them fellas. They were a great team.
What was your view of Meath?
I wouldn't be their biggest fan. But, ironically, growing up as a kid, I actually always loved Dublin and would still admire the way they play, obviously the game and that. And there were a lot of detractors, you know, normally 31 counties against them and that, especially with the run that they're on at the moment. But we had obviously there was a hard edge to Meath football, which is what you want, and unfortunately it's drifting out of the game now, which is, you know what I mean, very sad to see. And you see refs now, you know what I mean, you can hardly lay a hand on a lad or shoulder a lad now, but it's not a free or a yellow card or you know, and sometimes even more.
Yeah, you probably love Meath, do you? What was it, 2015, 2016, that incredible comeback game?
Yeah. Again, I suppose there was a mental barrier for us to get over there, a monkey off our back, but it meant an awful lot to me when we beat Meath for the first time in the history in championship football. And again, it's something I'll never forget and I'll take to the grave with me. But like that, growing up, Graham Geraghty would have been a hero of mine. As a player I would have looked up to growing up, you know, along with like Martin Flanagan from Westmeath and Desi Dolan and these lads. But he was the kind of player that I would have marked my own game on, you know, the way he kicked the ball. He's phenomenal. And as a Westmeath man, looking at a Meath man, you know, for inspiration, I suppose isn't a great thing, and a lot of supporters mightn't appreciate that, but he was a phenomenal footballer, and like Meath were a phenomenal team back then.
Yeah, speaking of phenomenal teams, here is another tweet from somebody saying, as a Kildare supporter, Kildare versus Dublin in the Leinster final in 2000, we'll all remember that. Kildare were dead and buried at half-time, according to Pat's plan. I'm pretty sure that footage is actually on YouTube if you seek it out now. And Kildare came out in the second half with 2 quick goals to rock the Dubs. I still get emotional when I think of that day. Amazing. Again, just another one of incredible amount of moments in that 10-year period that we'll always remember. Just it's not high on the percentage chances to have this amount of great moments, this amount of memorable moments within a provincial championship. I can't anyway remember this in this kind of close of a time, picking out so many very vivid moments in one provincial championship. I don't think we'll ever see it again in any coat. Maybe the Munster hurling championship. Maybe.
Yeah, Munster hurling probably, you know. But like there were great days, as you said. Like Offaly nipped in. Ironically, in '97 we were playing Kildare, and they got 2 lads sent off in the first 10 minutes, and Micko was over them, and they managed to still beat us, you know, which it was my first year in on the senior squad, and I remember looking at it and thinking, oh, holy mother, you know, it was desperate what we were looking at, unfortunately, but it showed the resolve that Micko and the fitness that he had instilled in the Kildare team at the time. But because I remember thinking actually during the game that, you know, we beat Kildare here, and we might have Micko gone out with Kildare. It might be gone a second time, you know, because he had come originally in the early 90s, he got to a league final against Dublin and that, and a Leinster final against Dublin, but hadn't got them over the line. And instead, it was probably the catalyst for them. You know, they had a few games against Meath then, a few great games against Meath in that year. I think the Meath squad suffered going into the Leinster final, and Offaly, do you know what I mean, pipped them with 3 great goals in the Leinster final. Like, you know, Finney Claffey obviously in his element at the time and in his heyday, which he had it for longer than most of us.
Ryan Malone, I think is right.
Ryan Malone, had speedy full forward, got a couple of goals as well. And you know, Kildare came back obviously 98. Kildare went, you know, and looked as if they were favourites for an All-Ireland final after beating Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final, and obviously Galway put on an exhibition in the second half that day. But you go through it. It's amazing, the teams, the standard of football, the quality of players, and as you say, the great games and great moments, great goals and great period. It was a great period, and look, I suppose it's a period that we yearn for now, you know. Sure. And the Dubs, like back then, like there was full houses, you know, in Leinster Championship, because Dublin weren't sure if they were going to be still there in August or September, you know, and they were packing out Croke Park as well as obviously whoever they were playing against, and you had neutrals, you know, many neutrals from different counties going attending the games at the time, and it's pity with Dublin's domination, you have very small crowds, unfortunately, now for some of the Leinster Championship matches in Croke Park.
Yeah, that's definitely a byproduct of it. One last text here. Kevin in Palmerstown's got in touch to say that he was at the Westmeath loss as a 14-year-old. Lyons got a lot of stick, and most of it centred around the fact that he wasn't from Dublin. Most felt it was outrageous that the county didn't have a dub as a manager, and it will never happen again. Is he probably right there?
That it was down to him being not from Dublin?
That Dublin will never have a manager outside of Dublin again.
Yeah, I think if it took a manager from outside to make sure that you were competitive in All-Irelands, winning All-Irelands, getting to All-Ireland finals, I don't know, I'd be happy enough with it. I don't think the lads would have any problem if I said to them for the next 10 years, Laois and Westmeath would win 5 or 6 All-Irelands by having a fella from Kerry or from...
That's the irony here, isn't it?
I don't think that'll be a problem for those boys. I mean, these fellas, like there was outside managers got them over the line, so I don't think so. I suppose it's nice to have fellas from your own county. I suppose the lads would agree that it'd be lovely to have your own involved, but sometimes it just doesn't happen like that. For me, I think it was just one of those things. There was a bit of a soccer side of things, a bit of a sort of a just... You see it in Premiership soccer where the fella is where the manager is a scapegoat, and he's just slated over stuff that has nothing to do with him sometimes, It's just fellas make mistakes. I mean, we were talking about the Champions League final there, and I mean that the keeper made a few bad mistakes. That wasn't your man Jurgen Klopp's fault. I mean, how can you blame him?
Yeah, as if he had some sort of psychic power to actually see that this would happen.
I don't think it was long. Maybe I didn't see it. I suppose when you're sort of in a little bubble when you're playing inter-county football, and you mightn't know what's going on around the county. But I just felt it was one of those things. People just got on a bandwagon, a negative bandwagon, unfortunately, of just slating the manager and blaming him for things,
Yeah, well, we leave that there. We are going to talk about this year's Leinster Championship because, as we said at the start, it has been really good, and we will address Dublin as well. But I just want to play this video first, or the audio if you're listening on the radio. This is Turlough O'Brien. He was speaking to Adrian Barry on Tuesday evenings off the ball. Have a look at this.
Not really, no, to be honest with you. Look, we're focused on our own performance and getting our own game right. Like, we've done a hell of a lot of work on how we play, and each member of the panel there can slot in and slot out of that team. And we were very polished in how we played the game, and we felt that we showed, last year against Dublin and Monaghan that we would be able to mix it with teams from Division 1 if we got the opportunity. And at some stage we felt we would take a scalp, and Monaghan were lucky to get that apart last year. So we had no reason to fear Kildare, and we felt with a lot of confidence in our own ability now at this stage. Our team is, it's quite experienced, but it's also sprinkled with some very, very talented footballers, and I don't think we get credit for that at all. Like, everybody thinks it talks about it being, a shock, and Division 4 teams and a Division 1 team, but when you look at the quality of players we have, like, I suppose the shock is that we were in Division 4 for so long.
Yeah, will you talk to us a bit about that? Eoin Sheahan was down at the game for us over the weekend, and he's been raving about what great quality football it was to look at. And I don't know if you read Mike Quirke's piece in the Examiner today, but he's been...
I did.
Yeah. So he's, essentially making the point that you haven't got enough credit for the job that you've done, that the traditional media are focused too much on the negative of it. So go on, you're not feeling that you're getting enough positive coverage for this?
No, I'm not saying we're not getting enough positive coverage, but I'm just saying that maybe the focus of the media is misplaced. I haven't heard too many yet, analyse the Carlow football team and look through the quality of the players that we have on the squad. In terms of physique alone, we're probably one of the biggest teams in the country. They're very, very, very highly well conditioned, very experienced. There's about 10 in that team there for about 10 years, and yet they're young men. And young men, I suppose, with a fierce drive to finally achieve something. They've been through very dark days, and their football ability really hasn't been, I suppose, seen on the big stage by the rest of the country. So there's no doubt about it. Like that, you have outstanding footballers there. Like quite a few lads have played at this stage with Leinster and so on, and some exceptional footballers, and I think the organisation, Stevie brought to the team, then has really, I suppose, got the best out of them in the last 15 months or so.
Turlough O'Brien there, Carlow manager, speaking to Adrian on Tuesdays off the ball. Do you see anything of yourselves from 2003, 2004 in this current Carlow team?
We ended up with a Leinster final, so It's not that I wouldn't like to see Carlow win the Leinster final, but I certainly hope it's not this year because obviously they'll have to beat us next week. It'll be at our expense and that. But there is the one thing he's mentioned, like they definitely have great belief. There's a belief instilled in them, and they have real quality players as well, you know, and a physical brand. You know, a number of them. Shane Redmond, Daniel St. Ledger, you know, they would have been on very good UCD, Sigerson teams, say, going back, and obviously they've added, you have the likes of Sean Murphy's great pace, young Jordan Morrissey is in his first year this year, he's kicked the winning score in the Freshers All-Ireland final for DCU. He's obviously a great grandson of the legendary Tommy Murphy of Laois and that, and obviously his father Jody was a great footballer and great servant for Carlow and Éire Óg as well. So they have qualities there, and they're playing a brand of football that they are getting obviously a certain amount of criticism for, but they're also after racking up great scores in the last 2 games.
What do you make of the criticism? Like, is it a roundtable agreement that it's not deserved? Dennis, we might start with you. I mean, do you like the way this Carlow team play football? But also, does it matter?
Doesn't really matter. Results is all that matters at the end of the day. I suppose Turlock hit the nail on the head there. They're a big, strong, physical team. And outside of Croke Park, they can compete against any team because they're so big and strong. Now, I don't know if they get to a Leinster final, if they're playing Dublin, if they'll be able to do what they did last year. But you have to give them great credit. Operating at Division 4, you know, and potential to get to a Leinster final. Same with Laois, you know, where they're after coming from. You know, they deserve great credit for that.
What do you think, Paddy?
I'd say for the three of us, we all won Leinster titles and enjoyed winning them, and it was a huge deal for us all. And I mean, if somebody told me that you would have to play a certain way, I remember before I won it, I'm sure it's the same for the two lads. If somebody told you, listen, you can win a certain way, it won't be nice, you wouldn't have cared. Do you know what I mean? I was so delighted to win in 2002. I'll never forget it. It was such a big deal. And if somebody said to me, you played very negative that day, it wouldn't have really mattered, to be honest with you. I think you can always evolve and you can adapt your team after a number of years. Once you get that sort of win, once you get that winning regime sort of set, a mindset sort of set into the team, then you can start to change. But I think the idea of him trying to play fancy football against Dublin last year, like, I don't see the point of that. And if they were absolutely destroyed, I mean, they were still well beaten, but I mean, if they were absolutely destroyed and Dublin ran rings around them, everyone would slate that fella and say he didn't have a clue then. And
you know, where would the confidence have been? Would they have actually beaten London and Leitrim and got that crack at Monaghan in the qualifiers? Who knows? And do you know what? I think, just having been down there last week, I don't think there is actually any need to be even having this conversation around the criticism, because I don't think it's fully warranted. I mean, just because a team, and I'm not sure you agree with this, just because a team plays very, very well defensively doesn't mean that they're a negative team. It means that they've got their house in order. It means that they've worked very, very hard on this. And some people can enjoy watching this sort of thing where you're sucking a team like Kildare in and they're trying to hop the ball over from 40 yards constantly and are constantly putting the ball wide. Carlow break at them and then put on a performance where they have 0 wides. That's entertainment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was 214, was it 215 that they racked up and that. And as you say, yeah, it is entertainment. I remember been down at the last league game in Dr. Cullen, and I suppose to an extent we're celebrating turnovers, you know what I mean, as much as the score and that. And the crowd, you know, the Carlow supporters, like the bandwagon is growing, you know, by the week and that. And I don't think they're too disappointed in terms of what they're seeing. And you know, obviously Jim McGuinness came and put his stamp on football, and it's going to be around for a number of years.
Yeah. Are you kind of a little bit worried that Carlow are going to come raging, looking for revenge now for the league final, that is, in the next weekend?
Yeah, I'm sure they are, and I'm sure they're confident. You know what I mean, after beating Kildare, because obviously, again, Kildare, okay, they were a Division 1 team. You know, they're Division 2. I suppose realistically, when you look at things like that, maybe they're a bit closer. Like Carlow are a Division 3 team now, Laois are a Division 3 team, and Kildare are a Division 2 team for next season and that. So it wasn't as big a shock, because obviously with Carlow's system, if Carlow get ahead of you, they can be very hard to break down, and obviously they can hit you on the counter-attack then. I think the secret will be for hopefully the Laois get a good start like they did in the league final.
It's going to be fascinating. Like, did you expect Laois to be in with a shout of reaching a Leinster final this year? Maybe with the draw, it looked like you could beat anybody on that side of the draw anyway. But like, John Sugar is doing fantastic work there.
Yeah, doing very well. You know, John, again, another Kerry man.
Yeah.
And that, so hopefully he'll be able to bring more success. Already he's brought the Division 4 title, and he has instilled a great confidence I think, in the team. And like even the first day, as you said, when we seen the draw, yes, we certainly did map out a road, you know what I mean, to get to Croke Park for the Leinster final. It didn't look good at half time down in Wexford when we were 10 points down. But it was a measure of the man and the squad and the talent and the composure that's in the squad that they still believe that they were able to come back from that. And they duly did. Like, they should have won it in normal time. Went behind and obviously went and won convincingly in extra time. Last week, again, slow starting against Westmeath. The first 25 minutes, I think Denis would agree that Westmeath had the better of it against the wind. But from there on, there was only really one team in it.
What's your view of the Leinster Championship now that you're a little bit removed from it?
Look, I just think Dublin are so far ahead. It's nearly laughable at this stage. Most of the teams in Leinster are operating at Division 3 and Division 4. Other than Kildare, or Division 2. So look, it's not, Leinster football is just not in a good place at the moment. All the other teams are all around the same level, but Dublin are just so far ahead, it's just not right.
The gap is growing as well, right?
I think the results show it's growing, When's the last time a team won the Leinster other than Dublin? Meath snuck one in there one year. Other than that, they're just completely dominant.
There's actually a text in correcting us to say that Laois won the Leinster Championship in 2010.
yeah. Meath threw one in.
And Laois as well. I mean, look at the likes of Laois, how far they've gone back. I mean, they're really struggling there now. I mean, during my time, the Laois and the Wicklow's were dangerous. You were you'd be wary going down there, playing them down in their home place, and they had a couple of knacky forwards usually and that sort of thing. Like, they seem to be really struggling. It's very, very worrying for Leinster football. Is it a reflection of Dublin or is it a reflection of the other counties? I don't know.
How do Dublin keep themselves motivated in these games?
I suppose Jim helps that an awful lot in that he's never going to get carried away about anything. He just seems to be taking each game as it comes, and people are getting fed up of his sound bites, his quotes, because he's talking about the process and he's talking about just working on step by step. And that's the only way to do it, because other than that, you're constantly thinking about All-Ireland finals, All-Ireland semi-finals, and who you could be up against, and will Mayo fall off the cliff? Will Kerry go up another notch? Whereas he just seems to be, he put out a strong team the last day. He didn't seem to be in any way worrying about long-term stuff. He takes it game by game, and I suppose that percolates down into the players' mentalities. They don't start getting carried away. They see this game as a stepping stone to another match and another match after that, and they're just worrying about this particular game. And I suppose it sounds a bit boring after a while, but it seems to be bearing fruit,
Yeah, but I'm sure Dublin players themselves, they'll never say it on the record until they leave and until they retire from this current Dublin setup, but I'm sure they're particularly worried about this as well, about the trend that we've seen in the Leinster Championship, because ultimately this is Gaelic football. It's the reputation of our sport that is being damaged here a small bit by the fact that there is such a chasm between Dublin and the rest in their own province.
But I suppose if it was the other way around, if you were in that camp, and the boys, I'm sure will tell you, if they were in that position, they wouldn't be too worried. They just can't, because they built themselves up to a point. When Laois and Westmeath built themselves up to a point where they were Leinster champions, they weren't worrying about the fact that Dublin had gone off a little bit back. They were just thinking to themselves, right, how can we get a little bit better again? I suppose from a GAA man's point of view, and we're all GAA men, you would love to see it a little bit more competitive, and you would love to see people moving up rather than Dublin dropping off. Dublin inevitably will drop off. There's no doubt about that. The underage success isn't as strong as it was. But I still think that it would be nicer for the other counties to sort of regroup and get stronger rather than be waiting for the day that Dublin fall off, because it could take years for that to happen,
It really will, and it really does. And I hate to be kind of the grim reaper of Leinster football, because of, as we've already outlined, there has been some cracking games here. Ultimately, it's going to be futile in where the silverware is going to go for this competition. So you can use that to as a stick to beat that whole debate with. But that gap is going nowhere, and if anything, it's just growing and growing and growing. And even if Dublin do fall off a little bit, that gap is still going to be gigantic.
Yeah, and I suppose you have to look at the other counties outside of Dublin, and you're looking at the players, and they're saying to themselves at the start of every year, there's not a hope of winning this Leinster title. So lads aren't committing, because it's a huge commitment to play inter-county football.
Is that what you were saying at the start of last season, for example?
Yeah.
What did you say? How do you manage to put that into perspective where the summer becomes something meaningful?
I take Dublin out of the Leinster Championship, really. That's the reality of it. I see lads, even just the Westmeath camp, lads are leaving, they're going to America, they're travelling, they're just not making the commitment because it's 5-6 nights a week now. And what's it for? To go up to Croke Park in a Leinster final and be bet by 20-something points, you know.
So it's like, what's the incentive for you then? Let's turn the clock back 12 months.
Yeah.
Like, what's your incentive for playing football last summer?
Well, I suppose I knew no different, but you know, it becomes part and parcel of your life, or who you are. It becomes your identity as a person, you know, inter-county football. But like for me, I always got a great privilege out of putting on my inter-county jersey. It's something I always wanted to do as a young person growing up. It was, you know, look, football was one of the only things I was very good at, you know. So every time I got an opportunity to play at the highest level, I did it, regardless if we were going to win or we were not going to win. But I think nowadays it's just, I suppose as well, when we started, everyone thought you could beat the other teams, you know, whereas now it's Dublin are going to win, and do we want to put ourselves through that hardship?
Like, do you look at what's happened in the hurling championship this year with the Joe McDonagh Cup? Because it's working. It's something that we're talking about because it's entertaining and because there's really good permutations that we're actually getting stuck into today because they're on a level playing field. Do you think that something like that might finally be a runner in football in the next 5 to 10 years?
See, people are giving out, they said they don't want to play in these tournaments, they want to play against the Dublins and that, but like as a player, when you're in that environment, you know, there's great buzz down in Westmeath now because of the way they're going in the Joe McDonagh Cup. Like it's Alan Mangan, actually, the corner forward there, he's a selector with Westmeath hurler, he's a fabulous hurler as well, like he's involved in it, like, and you can see the joy he's getting out of being involved with a team that's competing and actually winning games. There's no enjoyment out of losing games, especially when you're putting in huge sacrifice and efforts.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, the only thing, obviously, on the hurling, like, those counties have never been on a par, you know, with the top counties and that. So it has worked. Obviously, there's criticism, or Laois were disappointed, obviously, to be in the Joe McDonagh, but they're struggling to get out of it now. Hopefully, they'll beat Carlow today, you know what I mean, which will be a step towards giving them a chance. But they, you know, they were never on the level. And obviously there's criticism now of the system in terms of relegation, how will Leinster, be it, you know, Offaly or Dublin when it comes down to it. I genuinely don't think it would work in football. I think you'd have less, you'd have more inter-county players dropping off because it's a second tier or third tier competition, and that because you look at last weekend, obviously Carlow would definitely be in the bottom tier, Kildare would be in the top tier. You know, so that day that the Carlow supporters had last Sunday wouldn't happen. Longford would be in the bottom tier. Meath might, you know what I mean, scrape into the top.
But what about, say, like the Joe McDonagh Cup is based on the premise that the winner of the Joe McDonagh Cup will get to partake in that year's Liam McCarthy competition. So if Carlow were to win that second tier, they would still be able to compete for Sam Maguire in this very calendar year. So it's I'm struggling to see how there's actually a full kind of dead end here.
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, there's a stronghold within the provincials and that, to say, in terms of having their championships. So if the year was flipped, okay, you might have a more competitive summer and that, you know, with the championships earlier, and then the league during the summer. Or if you had a whole 32 county open draw with home and away games, with teams having to go on the road, it might bring about a bit more enjoyment than that. Personally, I know if I was back playing, and I would much rather be still lining out with Laois in the current format and having a go at the Dubs, even if it is a thing that, you know, you're ended up like, I think Laois have probably been to Carlow last year and might have been 10 or 11 points. Laois have got within 10 points of them for the last couple of years, but definitely if I was still, as I say, wearing the Laois jersey, I'd still be wanting to go the route that we're hopefully going at the moment, and hopefully get our big day against the Dubs in Croker.
I've two sides. I mean, part of me does very strongly feel there should be a tier championship, and then the likes of Chris here sitting beside me, I've come across lads with the very same argument and very strongly in that camp, and I sort of roll back and say, well, maybe I'm wrong. I'm still veering towards the tier championship, even though Chris is sitting beside me here. And I think I've had an argument with an ex-player before from a so-called weaker county, and it got sort of fairly heated at one stage a couple of years ago where we spoke with this for an hour. It was just one of those things where we were doing a show or whatever, and we were sitting there waiting for this. We were a little bit early and we were talking about it. He got very angry about it, you know, when I was talking about a tier championship, and exactly what Chris said. Look, I wouldn't be bothered playing in that. We have our rights. We should be able to have a shot at it. And I said, and it sounded cruel at the time, but I said, but you're just looking for one game. You're going to have, you will have one day, maybe 10 or 12 year career, if you're very lucky to have a 10 or 12 year career, and you might have one big day. Is it worth it? You know, I know that one day will be fantastic, and it will, you know, it'll come to fruition. Maybe it won't even, but if it does, will that make up for the other 11 years, you know? And he got angry about it and said, well, look, it's all well and good for you, you know, with your Dublin hat on. But I then tried to sort of take a step back and think of, like, Dublin are very strong at the moment. They were reasonably strong when I was playing. They're much stronger now. But I try to think of a sort of a weaker setup. And I was, Ballymount was in my club, and in the mid 2000s, mid noughties, we were absolutely terrible. Now, it's the best way to describe. It's the only way to describe it. We were awful. I was at the height of my career with Dublin. Things were going well, and things were really, really bad. We'd put poor investment, underage, a lot of different problems, fellas packing it in, etc., etc. We got tanked by Kilmacud and Vincent's in the first round of the Dublin Senior Championship both years in Parnell Park. It was a humiliation beyond belief. Maybe I felt like 20 or 30 points, maybe it was only 15, but it was pretty bad and it was sickening. And if somebody told me at the time, listen, you're going to be in the championship again the next year and you're going to play, I don't know who else, Nafina were strong at the time, Ballybowden, I would have felt like saying, look, I don't really want to do this anymore because I just don't feel there's any chance for us here. We were very, very weak and we needed to play in a B championship where we could win a few games, get a bit of a run going, and then with that momentum maybe come up, and that would bring people back into the setup, etc., etc., get a bit of confidence going. But I just felt that getting pummeled over and over again, and these teams are going to do this because the Dublins of this world and the Kerrys, their Mayos in the last number of years, they're professionally run. They're not going to have any sort of tolerance for a weaker county and sort of say, well, look, they're struggling, maybe we'll take a handy here. These guys are just going to go out and destroy you for the 70 minutes continuously, bombard you, and like tear you apart in front of everyone. And it's not because they want to do it to humiliate anyone, they're just going to do it because that's the way the game has gone. It's a professional game and all about payment, and they're just going to, like, very quickly, like between iPads and fellas in the stands and cameras, they're going to find out your weaknesses, they're going to destroy you, and they're going to continuously do that for the 70 minutes, and there's not going to be any let up. And then I don't know where that leaves you as regards a weaker county trying to develop. I just don't see, it's like a nuclear war, except that, you know, there is one team that's after winning and the other team is completely decimated and there's nothing left for them. So for me, I would be going with Dennis' side of things.
Yeah, well, it's a debate that's going to rage on for the rest of the summer. You'd imagine it's only going to intensify after whatever Dublin decide they're going to do in the Leinster semi-final and then in the Leinster final. But it was a pleasure to chat to you lads, Denis Glennon, Chris Conway, Paddy Christie. We'll get to your texts after this break, but appreciate your time. We could go on all afternoon. Thanks a million.
No problem.
We'll take a quick break.
Off the ball on News Talk. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
This week on Tech Talk, the World Cup is just around the corner, and with it comes the controversial video-assisted referee. Off the Ball's Dave McIntyre takes a look at the implications this tech could have on the game. We'll have some top tips for those roaming outside